Hello and welcome to this episode of Worldwise. My name's Isaac Stonefish. I'm an associate editor at Foreign Policy Magazine in DC, and I'm very honored to have as my guest today Min Zin, a Burmese journalist currently getting his PhD in political science at UC Berkeley. Min, thanks so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Obama's trip. I mean, is this what you expected? Is this what we want to see from Obama with regards to Burma, or was this too much too soon?
If you would ask me a year ago, would there be like President of the United States visiting Burma? I would say, oh no. To me, honestly speaking, which is very surprising, the change in Burma and the change in the context of U.S.-Burma relations seem to be very fast-paced. So whether it is good or bad, to me, I am quite positive because even though we have a lot of flaws in Burmese transition, President Obama's visit will, in a way, help the process moving on. But we cannot rule out possibility of reversal, of course.
So I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to family and friends at home, but what have people in Burma been saying about Obama's visit? What do they think about it?
I spoke to a couple of them who even were invited to attend the Obama public speaking event in Rangoon University. Generally speaking, people were so much thrilled. You know what? This is a once in a lifetime for Burmese people. It was the first time for the U.S. sitting president to visit Burma. So many people were so much excited, and they came out to the streets and they welcomed President Obama, and also politically seasoned activists also. They're, as far as I know, they welcome the visit. But of course, we have to mention the important voice from the ethnic minority. Many ethnic minority group who are still fighting against central government for the autonomy, quite skeptical. They want to make a cautious note with regard to President Obama's visit. They think it is quite premature until and unless you have like the ceasefire, or to some extent the stability and peace in the ethnic area. The U.S. president should not come to Burma, because it will be interpreted as an endorsement.
Can you tell us about what is going on between the central government and the ethnic minorities around the border region? How long has this been going on for? Are things getting better since Burma has been liberalizing? Is this a problem that's been being solved, or are things as bad as they've always been?
The ethnic minority issue in Burma is probably one of the most important issues Burma has faced since its independence in 1948. The Burmese, only Burman majority ethnic group that I belong to, are basically only in the central heartland part of Burma. All these borderlands are inhabited by the ethnic minority. These minority group live both sides of the border. When you look at the Thai-Burma border, or China-Burma border, India-Burma border, Bangladesh-Burma border, you can see ethnic minority group live on the both sides of the border. So the Burmese border basically created by the British, right? So British colonial rule. So I think the minority issue, the minority self-determination and autonomies are crucial. It's not only the political identity issue, but it's also a lot of political economy in terms of drug trade, in terms of human trafficking, in terms of illicit, like the businesses such as logging, are all involved in one of the longest civil war in the world, like Burmese civil war. So I think it's very important how to address the ethnic minority conflict in Burma. So far, the current government, the way that they approach, the way that they try to address is relatively, I would say, better than the previous regimes. But still, I think the Burman-dominated the regimes in Burma, they focus more on the I would say this way: they try to, even though right now they're trying to reach out, they're trying to enter ceasefire agreement with the ethnic minority group. They try to substitute development, for the ethnic autonomy. They think like they can resolve the ethnic politics by focusing mainly on the development issue. I think the actual issue is much more deeper and profound than if you go there and create job and make the ethnic areas an industrialized zone that can resolve the problem. That would be impossible dream, because this is the long-standing identity politics and grievances involved in this conflict, especially with regard to the northeastern Burma. There are ongoing civil war between Burman military and the Kachin ethnic minority. So a lot of human costs and refugees fleeing homes. At least 70,000 people are fleeing home. The conflict has been more than a year.
So, Min, I was reading the news on Obama's trip, and CNN referred to Burma as a formerly secretive country, which just seems like such a funny phrase to me. I mean, so much has happened in Burma over the last 2 years, but it's not an entirely different place. I mean, how would you get someone up to speed? If you had a visitor who would come to Burma a few years ago and hadn't been reading the papers, and then suddenly they arrived, what's different and what's still the same?
I think the most visible thing is you can see the free press, relatively, the freer press in Burma than before. They formally abolished the censorship, which was in place in Burma for 5 decades or so. So I would say this is a significant step. The other thing is you can see mushroom of local grassroots civil society initiative. People are now more assertive and more creative in getting involved in fighting for their own rights. You can see a lot of labor strikes, fighting for the fair wage, and also the farmers fighting for the land confiscation by the cronies and the military governments, and previous government. So you can see the activities of the civil society. You can see very vibrant free press, and also you can see the join, because a lot of political prisoners were released in past a year and a half period. So these are quite positive steps. These are quite positive steps, I would say. And what remained the same is basically, even though you could see the liberalization opening up, but in terms of power, I would say this way: you have more access to power, but in terms of who exercise power, it's remained the same. Military is the one who called the shot. So I would say the opposition have more access to power in terms of they can contest in the election, they can have some seats in the parliament, they can raise their voices, but still the decision, the policy, everything is basically decided by military or military-backed government. So I would say that access to power is now relatively broader than before, but in terms of exercise of power, remain the same.
Oh, that's fascinating. So Thein Sein, the president of Burma, has vowed to follow Obama's campaign slogan, "Forward." So what does that mean exactly if he's saying, okay, we're going to keep going forward? I don't know, what do you think are the next steps for liberalization with Burma, and at what point do you think he is going to reform so much as to make himself obsolete? You think he'll allow that to happen?
I think what he meant by move forward is, I think one of the major challenge Burmese government is now facing is the legitimacy challenge, right? Because they came to power with the sham fraudulent elections of 2010, and then they came to power under the constitution, like 2008 constitution, which was drafted and enforced by the military. I mean, according to the constitution, military is having the 25% of seats in the parliament without any contest in the election. So military have reserved seat in the parliament. Also, according to the constitution, military appoint some key ministers, like for example, defense ministers was appointed by the military, and also the border affairs minister was appointed by the military, and home affairs minister was appointed by the military. So military basically run the show, and at the same time, according to the constitution, military has a legal right to seize power if military think the country is in danger. So basically, no one really have a confidence in this 2008 constitution. That constitution will be able to address country's serious problems and crises. So I think that Thein Sein is fully aware of this legitimacy problem, this constitutional problem. So he is fully aware of military can anytime, basically his fellow generals can anytime step in and intervene in the politics. So that's why he want to guarantee President Obama, look, I want to move forward. I want to make sure military will not interfere or intervene the political liberalization process. That's why he want to. This is the message he want to deliver to the West and then Obama, because he definitely need the West to improve economy and to even transform military from like counterinsurgency army to the conventional and modern army.
Huh. Do you believe him? I mean, do you believe that if push came to shove, he would not call in the military and he would peacefully yield power? Or do you think that things could still go back to the way they were several years ago and a couple of years ago and decades before that?
I think the issue is that military is now not as a government, but as an institution. I mean, they have a veto power, basically. Military maintain the veto power, and the military maintain all these, I would say, the business power. I mean, right before the 2010 election, right before Burmese military, previous junta, decided to initiate the transition, they sold out the auction, the 90% of state assets, all these state industries, mainly to the military companies and their cronies. So they make sure the ownership structures is in favor of the military. So if something happened like liberalization, U.S. investment come in, who's going to be the local partner? Military and their cronies. So the playing field is already skewed toward military. I don't think military need to come in and like become like another next time they're villain. They don't need to be like the villain again. They can maintain their veto power behind the scene, and then they're now controlling the economic power. So what else do you need? As you have economic power, you have the veto power and political say. So then that's why I'm saying like the distribution of power is very much uneven. The playing field is very much uneven. Underdogs remain underdog. I mean, many political prisoners who were released recently, these guys their lives are so much in bad shape. Their spirits are very high. I spoke to like many political prisoners even last night. Their spirits are very high. They are very, strong. But in terms of resources, in terms of the time that they have to improve their capacity, they lost many years, decades and decades. So I think that in terms of skill, in terms of institution, in terms of resource, militaries and their cronies are on the upper hand. So now you liberalize the country. Now you can expect the foreign investment from the West, from neighboring country with more legitimacy. Now who's going to be local partner? Military and their cronies. So I think on part of military, they are quite confident, unless the civilian politician aggressively pursue the policy that hurt military's corporate interests. I think the military will be fine with that, whatever noise, whatever liberalization is going on in the country.
So how does Obama, or how do other Western governments and non-Burmese, foreign investors, how do they make sure that when they invest in the country that they don't just partner with the military or ex-military or companies that were formerly owned by the military? I mean, is that possible, or does it mean that if you go and you do business in Burma, you're doing business with someone with military affiliation and there's no way around it?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, it's a very important question too. To me, I think it's very difficult. But the only thing I can think of is that don't pay too much attention. Don't focus too much attention on capital-intensive industry or resource extraction industry. Because if you focus on the capital-intensive industry, your investment, will one way or another, will be in partnership with those who own capital in Burma, basically military and their cronies. So if you focus more on the manufacturing sector, like garment industry and other like agriculture, right now like the agriculture is the largest sector in Burma, right? We are still an agrarian society, but only less than 1% of foreign investment go to the agriculture sector. So it means majority of people, the farmers, they lost their land because of that confiscation by the cronies and the military, but they don't benefit from that foreign investment. And also, Burma, in terms of like trade and foreign direct investment exposure, which is pretty high, even higher than some of the ASEAN, like Southeast Asian neighbors, our exposure to the trade and investment. But the thing is, a lot of these things are in that capital-intensive and resource extraction sector. Then the ordinary people cannot get a job. Like manufacture, the industry is relatively very low and very ineffective. So I think I would encourage like investor to look into that possibility of your investment in that manufacture industry that can create, very low skill, like the basic manufacture industry that can create, I think like job for the ordinary people, that can create, I would say, labor, like the, like working class, and that can create, that can empower people like to be assertive of their own rights and so on and so forth. So I think I would probably encourage, that to think more about that labor intensive rather than capital intensive industry.
It seemed like a few years ago, Burma fit squarely in China's sphere of influence and did a lot of trade with China. And then over the past couple of years, as Burma has slowly started to open up, it does seem to be much closer to the U.S. than China, or at least that's the way it's perceived. I mean, how much influence does China still have in Burma? And is there a sector of the government or the people or the military that really wants closer relationship with the Chinese as opposed to with the Americans?
I think like traditionally Burmese military is very skeptical of Chinese influence, because remember like Burmese Communist Party, one of the strongest insurgency in Burma, a lot of Burmese military right now they fought against and they die in that their fight against the Burmese Communist Party. Burmese Communist Party was fully backed by Chinese. So from the perspective of Burmese military, whenever they fought against Burmese Communist Party, they know they were fighting against Chinese communists. So they dislike Chinese so much. But in 1988-89, because of the Burmese military cracked down on the pro-democracy uprising, and then the West sanctioned against Burmese military, so Burmese military did not have any choice. So they eventually are forced to rely on China. But after 20 years, they realize reliance on China does not help them even to transform their army from like jungle-based, counter-insurgency army to modern army. When they compare themselves with Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, they realize they are left behind so far away. So I think one of the major drive of the recent transition was that Burmese military really want to reduce their over-reliance on China. And they know the weapons they purchase from China, the training they receive from China, the services they receive from China are very, very in poor quality. So they realized if they continue that path, they will end up like North Korea, like digging the underground tunnel, or So I think Burmese military is fully aware of their over reliance on China. So that's the main reason why they want to shift. Not necessarily like 100% away from China, but they want to definitely shift to some extent away from China and to embrace, to diversify, I would say, their source of resources. So I think it's in one way or another, it seemed to be quite unanimous amongst Burmese generals. They want to distance somehow from China, and they want to embrace the West. I think the Obama administration managed to seize that opportunity. In 2010, there was a huge popular protest inside Burma against Chinese investment. Chinese investment in Burma seemed to be very much disregard the environmental effect and then local communities and all other basic rights. For example, the dam, 8 dams, basically 7 dams, Chinese building in the northern part of Burma and along the Irrawaddy River, the most important river in Burma. And one of the dam the size of the dam is bigger than Singapore. So a lot of Burmese, it's like 3.6 billion project. So Burmese were, all these things we did not know anything about that. There was a media blackout. All these agreement, MOUD, were done in secret. So because of recent opening up, people found out this is such a big, scandal. So then people protested against that dam building construction, and the Burmese government thinks they eventually conceded to suspend the dam construction. So my point is, these are the indicators, how the Burmese regime trying to, in a way, concede the popular sentiment, and these are the indicator how U.S. Decided this is a time we should step in, and we should probably bring Burma back from China embrace to probably place Burma in ASEAN, Southeast Asia, club, so that Burma can be socialized in more pro-U.S. club than isolated as the Chinese stooges.
You mentioned North Korea, and I think North Korea and Burma, very interesting comparison. A year ago, 2 years ago, both were pariah states, and now Burma is coming back into the fold. And North Korea has a very well-publicized fear of American attack, fear of America as the aggressor. Has there ever been fear in Burma that the United States has designs to invade? Are the generals paranoid about foreign invasion from the U.S., from Thailand, from China, or is it just that they're far more focused on their own domestic problems and are not worried, don't have any of those paranoid fears?
I think one of the main state building goal is to prevent any possible foreign invasion. There's so much paranoia about that foreign invasion, either direct foreign invasion or through proxy. So that's what they consistently thought Aung San Suu Kyi and opposition are the proxy of the Western, the intervention. So I think the Burmese military, perceive, whether it's real or not, but in the perception, they are really afraid of the Western intervention. Through proxy or direct intervention. That's why one of the theory is that's why they move their capital from Rangoon, which is a seaport, vulnerable to the sea, to the heartland Burma, like Naypyidaw right now. They move to the very remote area from the sea and all these coastal area. But that's what they believe, that they can defend themselves more from the foreign intervention, imminent or perceived or real one.
So how does Aung San Suu Kyi balance that? How does she balance being so loved in the West, meeting with Obama, meeting with Hillary, going and picking up her Nobel Peace Prize without stoking fears that she is a puppet of the West? How does she say to the hardliners that she is working for Burma as opposed to for foreign forces, as they might very paranoidly believe?
As I said, when she was released, Burmese military had confidence because they already set that institutional design, like constitution. They already, with that fraudulent, sham election in 2010, they already won landslide victory, 80% plus seats in the parliament. So I think they were quite confident, releasing Aung San Suu Kyi will not rock the boat, the fundamental structure of the system, new system. So I think they expected they could probably create more like authoritarian corporatism. They can incorporate Aung San Suu Kyi, under their, the hierarchy, and they incorporate other ethnic minority in giving them some status in this system. So, but sometimes the real process unfolds in an unexpected way. For example, they might not expect Aung San Suu Kyi would win landslide, in the by-election. So they would not expect that kind of thing. So I think Aung San Suu Kyi, on the other hand, seemed to be quite cautious. She did not push too hard. Even she hasn't pushed until now too hard on the Burmese military. So, for example, with regard to the ethnic issue, with regard to religious minority issue, she seemed to be quite silent. I think for two reasons. One is she doesn't want to upset the Burmese government and Burmese military, and the second one is probably it might hurt her popularity. The Burmese, many of them seem to be quite extreme nationalistic with regard to religion and other issues.
Then I want to go back to what you were talking about, the lifting of censorship, or much less censorship in Burma now. As a journalist yourself, if you could go back and spend several months reporting in Burma, what kind of stories do you want to tell that you and your colleagues weren't able to tell before?
I think what Burma need right now, what I want to do right now, is more investigative reporting, because of the mushroom of the weekly journals and internet and social medias, there are a lot of sensational reporting. There are a lot of irresponsible, without checking facts, especially in the context of religious, the communal violence in the western part of Burma. A lot of media try to rally behind the flag, attitude, so much jingoistic, reporting. So what I want to do right now is if I have a chance, I want to go back and just trace the whole process and uncover the facts. What's going on? Why this happened? Who is responsible behind the scene? And I just want to also uncover a lot of corruption. They are accumulated wealth, in terms of richness, on part of the cronies and former generals and military officers. So I want to know how come these guys are so rich. So these are the story I want to work on, basically investigative base. I think I would definitely encourage my fellow journalists inside Burma to focus more on that, reporting, rather than sensationalizing, editorializing. I don't think we need much opinion piece these days in Burma. We need facts, because opinion piece can trigger, very unfortunate bloodshed and the violence. So I would definitely prefer to do more facts, investigative reporting.
So I'd like to just close, and this is going to be very open-ended question here, but with all of the changes that are happening right now in Burma, if we were to have this conversation a year from now, say on Obama's next visit, what else do you imagine will have changed? I mean, what will Aung San Suu Kyi's relationship be with Thein Sein? How much more open will the country be? Do you think things will come to a stop? And it's kind of, as best to your ability, and this is just predicting here, but where should we expect Burma to be headed over the next 12 months?
I think probably the most possible improvement would be the economy. I think the economic rationality probably might be something that we can count on in the near future. because Burmese government is fully aware they need to reform economy. So I think they can attract more foreign investment and some kind of predictability and rationality will be something that we can rely on in the near future. But with regard to politics, especially with regard to ethnic conflict, I think that unless the Burmese military come up with the real solution, which guarantee ethnic autonomy, I mean, one way or another, some kind of like federal, form of union, one kind or another. I don't know. Again, I can't tell exactly what federal format, but some kind of like decentralization process must be taking place. Otherwise, ethnic conflict will be the prolonging, will be intractable for another decades and so. So that would be very sad thing. And the other thing is, I think the United States should really work hard together with the Burmese government and international community to stop violence in the western part of Burma. Otherwise, that communal violence, sectoral violence, will probably bring the military back in the political scene.
Well, Min, thanks so much for your time today. This has been a Worldwise between Min Zin, a Burmese journalist at Berkeley, and Isaac Stonefish, associate editor at Foreign Policy. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.